followed. Surveillance shows the man come up behind her, throw her against the token booth, beat her repeatedly, and stomp on her head. You see another man try to interrupt the attack, but the suspect chases him away, and then he keeps kicking her. Gomes
Hey, what's going on, y'all? Eric Mulger here with Code Red Conversations. Thank you for joining me today on this short notice live I'm doing. I'm sure most of you have seen this video already. It's pretty much went viral all over. And watching it, I felt really compelled to discuss a few issues that I saw. The obvious one being the beating that took place. I mean, that's the most obvious. The heinous, brutal, unnecessary, savage beating that this young woman, Elizabeth Gomes, faced at the hands of this insane man. And there are many issues related to this topic. The spike in crime, this bail reform, prison reform, everything that we're seeing with all these hardened criminals getting released who shouldn't be out in public. And so I'm going to dissect, I'm going to go watch and play through the one whole interview that she conducted on a local news station. We'll go through the whole, I'll let the interview play. I'll comment and I'll play another interview, which goes into a bit more detail as to who the suspect is and his past. So first and foremost, we're going to jump into the full video.
Man with a long arrest records in custody in connection with the brutal attack of a woman in a subway station.
CBS 2's Natalie Dudridge spoke to the victim, who says that it could have happened to anyone, and she's warning subway riders to be careful.
I'm scared. I would have never expected this to happen. Like, my life has changed.
Distraught and still in pain a week after she was brutally beaten, 33-year-old Elizabeth Gomes worries she may never be able to see out of her right eye again.
I really felt like it was going to be my time. But somewhere or another, I kept fighting to get up, and I made it, and I'm here.
Around 5 a.m. last Tuesday, Gomes was at the Howard Beach subway station headed to JFK, where she works as a security guard, when she says a random man started ranting.
Stuff like that, like he works for the devil.
She tried to ignore him as she walked up the stairs, but he followed. Surveillance shows the man come up behind her, throw her against the token booth, beat her repeatedly, and stomp on her head. You see another man try to interrupt the attack, but the suspect chases him away, and then he keeps kicking her. Gomes says she usually sees police here inside the station, but on that morning, there wasn't even anyone inside the token booth.
Very surprised. They're normally there. There's always some sort of protection at Howard Beach Station.
41-year-old Wahid Foster, who police say is homeless, was arrested a short time after and now faces felony assault charges. Sources say he has a long rap sheet. In 1995, he was convicted of killing his grandmother in Brooklyn when he was 14. He was arrested at least 8 more times once he got out, served 2 more prison sentences, including for a stabbing. He was paroled in 2021 and has 2 other open cases.
This guy did so much stuff. I was on the street.
Gomes' husband says now he doesn't want to let his wife or their 5 children out of his sight.
I'm scared to even leave my house. I don't even want to take the train. You know, I love my job so much, and a part of me, like, it doesn't even want to go back.
Gomes says she won't feel safe until he's locked up for good. Foster's next court date is October 6th. In Howard Beach, Natalie Dudridge, CBS 2 News.
Okay. Now I have so many comments and so many questions. Feel free to post your comments in the chat box so we can have a discussion as the video progresses. But there's so many problems and so many questions that I have. First of all, we all know that New York is a mess right now. New York City is a total mess with all of the foolishness that they allow. And it matters who you vote for, y'all, honestly. I don't like making these conversations political, but you have to understand the reality that if certain people who hold to a certain worldview, certain perspective, are placed in positions of power, then things like this, situations like this will happen more and more. And what do we see nationwide in many of these cities who were pushing the mindset of defund or abolish the police? What are we seeing consistently? We are consistently seeing crime going through the roof. We're consistently seeing nonsense, unnecessary violence like this. We're consistently seeing offenders who have no business being out on the streets, being put back out there. I recently did a live video, and you guys can check it out. It's the last live video I did where I was discussing I think it was the last one I did, where I was discussing a pastor who ended up getting arrested, and it was a viral video that went around. But after that video is mentioned, I discussed an issue where certain judges and DAs are not prosecuting cases. And you had a DA or a judge who allowed a man who was out on capital murder and had multiple failures to appear in court. They allowed him, every time they lowered his bail, every time he violated his court dates, didn't show up for court, they consistently lowered his fee, his bail, until they came to the point to where it was a $9,000 bail, which basically means all he had to do was come up with $900, and he's on his way home. And I think that was somewhere in Portland or somewhere like that. Don't hold me to it. But it's a reality of who we elect and put in power. The more likely we're going to see garbage like this, and you're going to have to deal, and it's going to spread increasingly to other countries. Excuse me. It's going to spread increasingly to other cities. And before you know it, it could be happening in your backyard if it hasn't already happened. But back to this main video here, I want to address the issue of just what we saw during the video. Now, we know, okay, if you happen to be unfortunate enough to be still living in one of these cities, if we just watch this video, I'm going to let the video play again, the opening scenes of this video. I'm going to let it play again. And I just want to kind of walk without any sound, and I'm going to slow it down a bit. I'm going to slow it down just a little bit as the video progresses. Bring it up to let me bring it up to the beginning here, to where all the violence takes place. And I just got to let this play through here, because it's one of the issues I have is just, I'm so disheartened with the men in our society these days. Now, let's back it up a bit. 1 second. Now, I think this first person running here, the first person we see running with the yellow jacket on, I think that's a man. Let me make this a little bigger. Excuse me, y'all. Back it up a bit. Back it up a second or two. I think the first person we see here running, right here with the yellow shirt on and the black backpack. Don't quote me on this. I can't say 100% for sure, but it appears to be another man running away from this dude. And in the meantime, this woman is about to get attacked. Look at this, how he runs her down and just slams her against the wall, brutally. I mean, so savage, so unnecessary. And then you have another guy who shows up. Okay, he sees what's going on. He figures he wants to get involved because obviously he knows it's wrong. Dude backs up, bows up at him. He doesn't have a weapon in his hand, runs him off. And then he returns to beating her senseless. Now, anybody who's familiar with my channel knows, or familiar with me, period, if you follow me on Facebook, or especially if you follow me here on YouTube, you know how I stand about where I stand when it comes to men being men and men putting themselves in position to protect those who can't protect themselves. I'm a Christian man, and I think there's something to the passages in Scripture that tells us to speak up or stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves. There's something to that. There's a reality to that. And I see too much these days cowardly men who are unable or unwilling, which may make it even worse, who are unwilling to step in and intervene when they see evil taking place. And I know that there are circumstances beyond some people's control, physical, might be some medical issues or elderly, whatever the case may be. I know that there's a reality to not everybody can do that. However, like I say consistently, barring any physical limitations, I truly struggle to understand how any man, especially men, and even women to a larger degree, especially in the society, in the world that we're living in, but especially men. I'm talking to the men out there. I don't understand how anybody could sit back and not gain the physical ability, these tactical abilities. Even if you have physical limitations, why not be in possession? Why not learn how to use a firearm? Why not? The way this man was beating this woman, deadly force could have easily been justified. Easily been justified. The way he was beating her down. He could have killed her. He could have easily killed her. And she's lucky that her injuries, as bad as they are, and I'm not trying to minimize her injuries, she's lucky that her injuries are not significantly more severe. But man, this culture today, this society, and I can't just say it's just this society, because I know these things have been happening since the dawn of man, since the beginning of time, beginning of creation. I understand that. But maybe it's just the fact that it's more prevalent because we have social media, we have more surveillance cameras, everybody's got a camera phone these days. Maybe we're just seeing it more. But it boggles my mind how anybody can just walk away after seeing somebody being brutalized like that, a woman being brutalized like that. I don't get it. I just don't get it. Let me respond to a couple comments here. Why do you think this is not an attempted murder case? Brother, I have no idea. I have no idea. Because the savagery of the level of the assault, I think it could have easily been. And then knowing the history of the individual involved, I think you can make a clear case that he was trying to kill her. And he could have. So I'm done. I have no idea. I wonder myself. Words don't hurt against criminals. That's why my friend Smith & Wesson is by my side. Amen, brother. Amen. But just walking up to somebody and trying to get them to back down isn't going to cut it. Especially if you're dealing with someone who's walking down the street talking about demons. He's working for demons. Especially in that situation. I mean, and he meant, obviously, this guy who in the orange top wasn't privy to that information. But man, you don't know what, and maybe it's just me because of the fact that I spent over 20 years in law enforcement. Maybe I just have a different mindset. And of course I do, because I've seen the worst of society pretty much every day of my life for 21 dang years. But unless you have your head under a rock in our society today, unless you're living literally with your head under a rock, or you never watch the news, or you never get on social media, then there's no excuse for not being prepared to get involved and not be willing to do so. Again, barring any physical limitations. And even then, you can still learn how to use a few tools. You can learn how to, and I know it's hard in some cities. Owning a knife, owning a gun in New York is difficult, but it's not impossible because I know many people who live there and they are in possession of a gun legally. So it's not impossible. Thanks, David. I appreciate that. So let's progress to the next video. We're going to go through some of the same footage. They're going to show a little bit more. And again, if you're just joining me, clearly I'm addressing the attack in the New York, I think it was a Queens subway train station in New York a week ago, or just not that long ago, where this woman was savagely attacked. I want to show an additional video here. Let me get the speed card, get everything right here. I don't want this to be in slow motion sounding crazy. But that's one. So those are two of the issues that I wrestle with. Obviously, we understand what's going on in our society when it comes to crime. We get it. We know how things are getting out of hand because you have a select group of people who just don't care, who think that people are just good and they're just misunderstood. And that puts you in a bad situation already because they have a false understanding of the true nature of man. They have a really bad understanding of what a man is capable of. A lot of people out there are a lot of people who think that all we truly need are programs and resources for certain individuals, and everything will be fine. But there's been so much money pumped into programs. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood over the last 50 years or so, $20+ trillion that have been pumped into. If I'm not mistaken, that's a figure I heard from Robert Woodson of the Woodson Center. He's the founder of the 1776 United program. Solid man, solid activist. And there's been so much money pumped into programs attempting to get people to act right. And I'm not saying that shouldn't be a thing, that there shouldn't be an occasion for programs to divert people, especially young people, into doing better. But we have to understand, we have to have a true understanding, a true solid anthropology. I would dare say a biblical anthropology, meaning understanding or study of man, understanding their true nature in order to address these issues. And the moment that you assume that just because somebody is a minority or because someone is mentally ill, then that means that they are harmless or misunderstood, then you are totally clueless in my mind. Totally clueless. But let's watch this next video here. And we're going to hear some of the same details, some of the same information repeated. But I think that this offers, they're going to go into a bit more detail as to his background, his history. It's chilling.
Violent attack at a Queens train station, all caught on camera.
Police say the suspect is a career criminal, long history of violence. Now he's back behind bars, but who knows for how long. A lot of people wondering why he was out on the streets in the first place.
She nailed it. He's back out. She's like, he's in jail, but who knows for how long, because they see it every day. They see it every day. They see the foolishness going on in New York. Evil men and women and kids being allowed to be back out on the streets.
Robert Moses has more from Howard Beach this morning. Robert, what does it take? That woman was beaten pretty brutally by this guy.
Good question.
Yeah, she sure was, Rosanna and Bianca. It's a question that we ask, seems like every single week, and we don't ever get any good answers. Put yourself in this victim's shoes. So many New Yorkers can relate. You're just going about your business. You're on the subway a little earlier than this time in the morning. Someone approaches you to try to make conversation. You ignore that person. That's exactly what this victim did, but she paid dearly as a result.
The video is brutal to watch. Police say 1 week ago at about 5:15 in the morning, 41-year-old Wahid Foster, a homeless career criminal, followed a 33-year-old woman off a northbound A train at the Howard Beach Air Train Station. You can see him fling her to the ground and proceed to savagely beat her. The video shows a passerby start to intervene and then leave after Foster walked menacingly towards him.
It just blows my mind every time I see it, and it pisses me off seeing these men run. I'm sorry, I really struggle with that. Run away, let this woman get beat up. I don't want to get hurt. Self-preservation, that's all some people can think about. That's all some people care about.
Foster then resumed his assault, kicking his victim repeatedly before walking away. Police say she had ignored him after he tried to engage her in conversation. He then followed her off the train and beat her. She was taken to Jamaica Hospital. Police arrested him shortly after the assault. Police say Foster has been a criminal for most of his life.
And another thing, I wonder, why didn't they show like a solid mugshot? Dude's been in and out of prison for decades. Decades. And here's where they get into his background, into a bit more detail.
In 1995, when he was just 14 years old, he was arrested for killing his own 82-year-old grandmother in Flatbush. At the time, authorities said a dispute over money led him to punch her repeatedly. She then laid down on her couch and died a short time later. In 2010, police arrested him for stabbing a 50-year-old woman at Creedmoor Psychiatric Center in Queens Village. Police tell me he stabbed her in the left cheek and right shoulder, causing permanent disfigurement. Police say he was paroled last year. A little more than a month ago, on August 20th, police arrested Foster for petty larceny. The very next day, August 21st, he was arrested again, this time for criminal mischief. And then 1 week ago today, he beat the woman at the Howard Beach Air Train Station.
Why is somebody like that? Why is someone like that is allowed to be out on the streets? Why is someone like that allowed to be out on the streets? Someone help me with that. Somebody help me with that. Why is somebody like that allowed to be out on the streets? Who, like, what would have to sink into your brain to think that that's a good thing? This guy, this dude, with his history, he's received a mental health treatment on multiple occasions, clearly. Then you let him out. There's no true guidance to make sure that he stays on his medication. That's assuming that it would even be helpful. And then he just shows a consistent track record of harming and hurting people. Sometimes you just got to realize that there's some people who are just better off being locked up. Being locked up, better off. This is frightening on so many levels. Yes, ma'am. Yes, it is. And I can only imagine how it feels to be a woman seeing something like this and knowing that this could happen to you or anybody for that matter, but in particularly a woman. Because the reality is the woman is the weaker vessel in most situations. The woman is the weaker vessel. She does not have, unless you're talking about some of these outliers like these CrossFit Games athletes or some Olympic powerlifter or some MMA fighter. But still, when you get down to it, when you get down to the brass tacks, there's a dramatic difference in strength and power and bone structure and muscle density, and when you compare a man to a woman, which only makes this even that much more heinous. And I think I beat it. I think I beat the fact that these men were running. I think I beat that. I don't think I can beat that anymore. Beat it like a dead horse. But it just has to, I can only understand how that would be so unnerving. That could be so unnerving to someone, in particularly a woman, because it's just getting wild out there, y'all, honestly. But let's let this video proceed a bit more.
She sustained a serious injury to her eye. She said in a televised interview that even a week later, she still has throbbing pain in her head, and you can certainly understand why upon watching that video. As for the suspect, city records show that Foster remains in custody on Rikers Island. He is due in court on October 6th.
Now, all we can hope is that maybe, due to the fact that this has received so much publicity, it's been so publicized, maybe, hopefully, prayerfully, these people, somebody will wake up and realize at least this guy needs to be put away, and put away for a long time. I know a lot of people, and there's definitely some things to complain about when it comes to the old 94 crime bill. But I think a lot of times as we move away from the reality of what was going on at that time, the crime in our nation was at an all-time high. There was a legitimate crack epidemic. And the crack cocaine was everywhere, and it was decimating communities, in particularly black communities. Homicide rate through the roof, drive-by shootings became in vogue and in fashion, and it was happening all over. And most of the leadership in a lot of these communities were the ones who wanted there to be harsh penalties. Now you fast forward almost 30 years later, and people just forget. They forget everything that was going on at that time in our nation that forced the hand of a lot of politicians, and I believe rightfully so. I believe that there were a lot of things that were needed to impact our society, to act as a major deterrent so that the crime could go down. And I think it did impact. I think it did play a role. Again, I'm not saying that it was perfect, obviously, but I think that there was a necessity for it. And the direction we're moving in now, it can only be a matter of time before we head back down that same path, in my opinion. It can only be a matter of time before we head down that same road. Oh, you're welcome, sis. Definitely. See what Chris has to say. Sadly, so many progressive lawmakers want to play make-believe and think that if they will stop incarcerating people, it will make everything better. Yeah, that's what a lot of them believe. They believe that the system is what's causing these people to act this way. They don't believe that it comes from within. They don't believe that it could be a cultural thing. And this is a point that I bring up often. And, I'd love to know what you guys think about this. It's a point that I mention a lot. When we look at the crime rate in our inner cities, and I know a lot of people don't like talking about it, but we have to be realistic. The crime is higher in a lot of our black communities. It's just a reality. It's an unfortunate reality. And then if we take a step back and we examine, we wonder why it's happened. It seems to be happening to the degree that it is when things are better. There are more opportunities for all kinds of people in our nation. So when we look at the fatherlessness rate in our nation, and then when we examine the actual data, what does the data say about fatherlessness in our society and how it impacts a young person's life? They have when it comes to children, young women have a significantly higher chance of ending up pregnant. Young men in particular seem to be hit the hardest. Greater likelihood to drop out of school, greater likelihood to suffer from mental health issues, depression, more prone to violence, more likely to end up locked up in prison, more likely to be homeless. When you factor in the reality that the fatherless home rate in the black community is around 75%, is it insane to ask or to consider the impact that fatherlessness has on the culture within a lot of black communities. Now, I'm not saying that this is prevalent with everyone. Obviously not, because if it was, there would be a drastically greater number of violence. But we can't ignore that there is a reality to that, to some degree. And instead of constantly blaming everybody for all the problems in the black community, oh, blame the white man for this and blame, it's placing blame everywhere. Sometimes, eventually, we're going to have to stop and start looking within and ask ourselves, what are we doing wrong? Godlessness abounding, social justice becoming the new religion of our age. Organizations like BLM who say that they want to disrupt, even though they took it down off their website, they want to disrupt the nuclear family. How can you say that Black Lives Matter, that you actually think Black Lives Matter, when you want to disrupt the nuclear family, knowing the impact that a lack of fathers, the destruction of the family has had on the black community? I mean, we don't even need to go there. I don't think if anybody that thinks Black Lives Matter is a legit organization, then you need to do some more research. You have 10 independent BLM organizations around the nation who are suing BLM Inc. or BLM Incorporated because they said they haven't seen a dime of the fund, all the money, over $100 million they got in the 2020 post the death of George Floyd, all the money they got. And most of these organizations haven't seen a dime of that money. I don't even know, y'all. Seriously. I appreciate y'all jumping in for the conversation, man. You guys are blowing it up over here. They try to pretend that this level of evil has nothing to do with the criminal and everything to do with an unjust system. Man, you're preaching over here. That creates inequality that causes them to act out. They deny evil, clearly. But when you're dealing with people who are trained Marxists, socialists, many atheistic, this is what you get. And I'm not saying that if you're an atheist, you know that you completely lack rationality. I think that there's something to be said about some of your thinking. Scripture, biblically speaking, the Bible does call the non-believer a fool. And that's not meant as an insult, but it's just a lack of knowledge when you see creation, the evidence for creation all around us. But that's a completely different topic. But when there's so many people, I can recall a few years ago, while we were still battling it out in Afghanistan, there was I think it was a couple who went over there to try to meet up with the Taliban and to just love on them or something like that. We ain't heard from them people since. If last I heard, if I'm not mistaken, I think they were executed. It's a complete lack of common sense. I think those people are intentionally blind. I think they're intentionally blind to reality. Again, just like you said, Chris, just like Chris said, they want to believe that people are just a product of a unjust or an evil system or society that makes them this way, as opposed to knowing that mankind, that we have a nature that's sinful inherently. Yes, I'm looking at the force he's using on her. Unbelievable. Man, you know, I was talking to the family this morning. He beat her like she was a man who did something to his kids. Like, seriously. I mean, that's the level of force, if I can borrow your words, sis, and disdain that he unleashed on her. Man, I'm not about vigilante justice. I'm not about celebrating something like that. But when you see, the natural response in me is to just want to hurt somebody when I see someone do something like that to that degree, unprovoked. That's the thing. That's what I wrestle with the most. Because I remember growing up as a kid and being bullied at times. And I remember that once I got to a certain age, I just told myself that I never wanted to allow that to be the case in my life. And I remember going to my dad in 1986, 87 and asking him to start taking karate lessons. And I dove with both feet, both hands, head first into that life, and developed some skills, a high level of skill, very, very rapidly. And got into weight training. Then I joined the Army. And then after that, and then I spent pretty much on and off throughout the course of my life. I've been immersed in some form of martial art, even to the point to where now at 52 years old, I feel like I'm in some of the best shape of my life, and I'm confident that if something ugly goes on around me, and I say this often, I know I can't whoop everybody, but I know I can handle my business. I can protect my family to the best of my ability. Whoever comes and tries to harm them, they're going to have to go through me, and it ain't going to be just some easy path unless you got the numbers game on me. But even then, I'm not just going to sit back and let someone violate anyone around me. Anyone, no, especially not a woman, especially not a child or someone like that. I honestly believe that the Lord put a mindset in me and a desire in me at a young age, because I had thoughts about being a cop when I was 12 years old, maybe younger, watching the old school TV shows. But as far as actually considering law enforcement a career, 12, 13, 14 years old, I was really thinking that's what I wanted to do. And then just throughout the course of my life, corrections, and spent a few, almost a couple of decades in that world, or not almost a couple of decades, but I spent a good 13 plus years in that world, and then finishing out my career as a actual police officer. I've always had that mindset of wanting to help and protect. I can recall being in high school, planning on joining the Army, getting involved in doing some tactical training and getting out and becoming a professional bodyguard. And that's something I still have somewhat of a passion for, that world. I would love to do the training. I'm not trying to work as a bodyguard, but I would love to gain those skills. But I think it is something that was just the Lord placed in me, and it was something that I just nurtured throughout the course of my life. And so I really wrestle when I see stuff like that. When I see people getting harmed on that level, I really struggle with that. Oh, thank you, sis. You know what? I think, and I know that nowadays it's popular because you have people on all political sides who argue about the '94 crime bill. And I'm actually trying to work my way through the entire bill because I don't want to speak ignorantly, but to some degree, I'm not going to go into all the details and say that it was all bad or it was all good, because I haven't done a deep enough study to do so. But I do know that there was a lot of good. And right now you have people on all political sides who love to say, oh, so-and-so created the '94 crime bill that locked up black men. You just hear so many conservatives say that, and it pisses me off, because I'm like, it wasn't like a lot of these dudes were just sitting on the block minding their own business when people drove by and just yanked them up and took them to jail. No, a lot of them were career criminals. A lot of them had a violent history. A lot of them were repeat offenders who did not deserve to be out on the streets. And we had a different society. We have a different society now compared to almost 30 years ago when it comes down to drugs. Now people are trying to make everything legal, which I think is insane. And we will ultimately see the fruit of that as time goes on. Already, places that have legalized marijuana are seeing an increase in DUIs, marijuana-related DUIs, which ultimately means more people dying on the streets on our highways as a result of that. And again, it's what worldview do you bring to the table? If you assume that mankind is inherently good, you're going to say, oh, let them do what they want to do. People are going to be responsible. But I've seen enough of mankind going unchecked throughout my law enforcement career, throughout my military career, and just growing up to know that that's nonsense. That's a completely irrational view. I appreciate that comment. Hold on one second, Dawn. I'm not forgetting you. I got a bunch of comments here. Okay, what do you think about them letting the guy Hinckley go completely on his own that shot President Reagan? They know that he has a mental problem. I think I read that he has been living supervised. I pray that he will not harm again. You know what? I haven't really went through the details of it. I heard talk about it. I think it all depends on, but you know what? There's a tremendous, let me preface my comments with this. There is a a massive difference between someone doing what they're supposed to do while locked up and how consistent they are on whatever program they're supposed to be once they get out on the streets. I knew some people who were utterly insane when they were out on the streets because they would self-medicate with marijuana, alcohol, PCP, cocaine, crack, whatever, meth. But then when they got in jail, they're forced to get their assigned medication, basically, to some degree, depending on the situation. When there's structure around them, then they're fine. And they could be out in general population. They wouldn't necessarily have to be in the psych unit. So I don't know. I wonder how he'll end up being. I hope he continues to take whatever medication he's supposed to take. Maybe he was only focused on Reagan, but I don't know. We're in a society nowadays, the way the culture is nowadays, there's so much villainization of people who lean more Republican, more conservative. There's so much villainization, constant comparisons to Hitler, constant comparisons to fascists, which are totally ridiculous. Constantly being called bigots and racists and the greatest threat to our society. All these things are so irrational if you sit back and you just examine them, they're completely senseless. So I can easily see how somebody who is already dealing with mental health problems, one, and easily manipulated could say, hey, you know what? I need to go out there and be heroic and stop this potential threat. And I think that the people who promote this kind of rhetoric should be held accountable to some degree. But that's a great question, Don. When there are no consequences for evil actions, criminals have no reason to cease grave acts of evil. Exactly. It's the old adage, when the cat's away, the mice will play. And we're living in a society, a culture right now that villainizes law enforcement, villainizes the criminal justice system. And because right now it's difficult all across the nation to hire good, qualified police officers. So therefore, you get situations like this where the woman gets beat down. She said normally there are cops who are down there to protect them. I think they call them like the transit police or something. I know New York has a bunch of police jurisdictions. But when you have such, across our nation, there is a dearth, there's such a lack of people with a desire to be cops, that this is the way it's impacting society. Crime is running rampant everywhere. It is well and good to look at how we can prevent crime, but we must hold criminals accountable. Absolutely. Absolutely. Smash and grabs happening every which way, everywhere, every way you look, because there are a lot of cities across the nation, and once again, in certain political groups running rampant, the progressive cities, like places like Washington State, Portland, Oregon, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Philadelphia, New York, Atlanta, parts of Austin, Texas, LA, all throughout New York, northern New York, southern California, northern California, southern parts of Southern California. That's what I meant. And where people, they decriminalize certain acts to try to make it look like crime has gone down. No, crime hasn't gone down. You just change what the law says about a certain act. So what are you going to get? Okay, you have to steal $2,000 or $2,500 in order for it to be a felony. If not, it's going to be a low-level misdemeanor. So you're emboldening these individuals to go into these communities, into these stores to rob and destroy and smash. And ultimately, what are you going to do? Because as soon as somebody says, you know what, I'm going to take my store, I'm going to shut it down, and I'm going to move it out of these communities, sometimes out of the black community, or when all these places shut down, people automatically want to assume it's racist. No, my business is failing because I can't keep up. You're trying to cause me to raise the minimum wage. I keep getting robbed all the time. My insurance rates are going up, so I have to increase the prices of my products. So now the business is getting worse and worse because people aren't going to buy from me. I can't compete with Walmarts and big stores like that. And then they shut down. And then they say all these people are leaving because they're racist. It's just a continual cycle of nonsense. Crazy. Totally crazy. Fatherless plus the hip hop culture. Whoo, my sister. That's something else I want to talk about. That's something else I want to dig deep into. And you know what? I don't know how deep you get into that. Maybe we can have maybe we can collaborate on that, because those two topics right there, man, oh man, I think that's destroying the black community. Fatherless plus the hip hop culture is a huge contributor to what we're witnessing. It is so messed up completely. So well said. So well said. They haven't seen a dime. Let me show you my shock face. You talking about BLM? These local BLM chapters? Right. They haven't seen the dime because these people are pocketing it. Man, they're being sued all over, and so many people are reporting on them. I called them out from the beginning, and I can remember, man, people just going at me. Some of my old co-workers from, especially in the county jail here, they were just coming at me left and right when I say BLM is a joke. They are a corrupt organization. They are evil, demonic, and some of my old homies were just so offended by that. But all the corruption that they're being accused of, something's got to be true, because they're getting it from all sides. It's not just you're just hearing it from people who are against BLM. They're getting it from BLM supporters who are taking them to task over these issues. What I can't stand, Mr. Muldrow, is when parents come out in the news with their precious jewels dressed up in the graduation pic. They cry, blame society, and especially the police. BLM is a joke started by the Democrats. Very, very true. And I remember when BLM first showed up, nobody took them seriously. Nobody took them seriously. Even many Democrats didn't take them seriously. But I think once they saw that they can use this, they can use their focus on conservative principles and Republicans, and to create a culture war, or to not create one because there already was one, but to stir up the culture war even more severely. And ultimately, you villainize the police, and you get what we're seeing right now. You get what we're seeing right now. And you know me, y'all know me. If you've followed my channel to any degree whatsoever, you know I'm equally as critical as of the police as I am on anyone who may attack or do harm to someone else. If I see a police officer doing wrong, I'll call him out in a heartbeat. I just did a video yesterday, if you haven't seen it, the video of the police officers who left their parked patrol car on the train with the suspect in the back seat, and a train came by and just totally decimated that vehicle. And by the grace of God, only by the grace of God, did that woman survive. So I am very vocal about the police and about the problems that are on the police department. But I would say that it pales in comparison, or not a bad term. I would say that our culture, the media, our sports teams, BLM, organizations like BLM have exaggerated the problems, severely exaggerated the problems that are happening on most police agencies, to the point now to where you open the door for all this kind of garbage. All this garbage we're seeing. the way that woman was hammered and beat down and decimated, I think that to some degree there's a link. There's a link to all that. It all ties into Black Lives Matter. It's this unrealistic push for police reform, to the point to where you're not talking about, hey, let's look at some of the issues within policing and rationally and try to have a rational conversation and reasonably examine these issues, which is one thing. And I would love to be a part of some of those conversations, as opposed to defund or abolish the police. Abolish, like completely get rid of them. And what was the term that was flying around a couple of years ago? Let's reimagine policing. And at no point have I ever heard anyone define what that means, to the point to where you detail, how does that impact the crack dealer down the street, or the guy who is committing strong arm robbery or armed robbery, down the block, or the guy in there who's pimping out these young girls. How do you deal with that in a society, in a culture that has abolished the police? How do you deal with the active shooter in a society that has abolished the police? Because typically, a lot of the policies that go hand in hand are, you don't want guns. They're trying to get rid of your right to bear arms, your right to defend yourself. How do those correlate? And at no point, and I'm talking about, I listen to some of these professed intellectuals have these conversations, but I've never heard anyone address those issues. The reality of violence out in that real world. Angela Davis, I heard her write about it and listen to multiple lectures from her just to see, okay, if you have somewhat of a coherent argument. Somewhat. Because if they did, I would give them credit for it. But I haven't heard anybody. There could be somebody out there who has an idea that I haven't heard. If anyone hears anything or has seen anything, please share it, especially if you follow me here, if you follow me on any of my other social media pages. Send me a link to something. But I'm begging to hear a somewhat reasonable response when it comes to this police abolition and prison abolition. How do you deal with the actual evil criminal out there? And I've yet to hear it. And I honestly don't think I will. Hey, what's up, brother? Disgusting. He bragged about killing his mother or grandmother. People like this will not rehab. Right. Man, I said it earlier, man. There's some people out there who just need to be put away, period. And there's some people out there who just need to be put to death. I truly believe that. I'm not celebrating that fact. I'm not happy about that, but I'm realistic too. There's some people out there that if they are allowed to continue out in society, they will only do harm. I've known people when I first came to Vegas and hired on with Las Vegas Metro Police, I was 26 years old, working in the county jail. There were some people that by the time I retired, almost 18 years later, they were still out there committing crime. And some of it was violent crime. Eventually you just have to look at some cats and be like, and not just guys, mostly guys, but men and women. Sometimes you just have to look at some people and just be like, okay, it's over. You've demonstrated on too many occasions that you cannot adjust well to society. So we got to take your freedom away, period. Sucks for them, but in our society nowadays, it's more about the criminal, and the victim is almost always forgotten, almost always ignored. I can't say I'm in the best shape, far from it, but if I had to defend myself or someone else, even if I go down, I'm not going down easily. That's the mindset you have to have. I would say it's best to put yourself in a position to be in better shape and to be better skilled, and whether it's be with a firearm or other weapon or just with your hands, of course, because you want to minimize your risk of hurting yourself. You want to be able to last an extended amount of time if necessary, run an extended distance if necessary. But to hightail it like them cats did in this video, bro, I would have felt better if I saw somebody go over there, tried, and get smashed in the process. At least you can say he tried to do something. But to take off running like that and leave a woman to this insane individual's wrath, pathetic. I appreciate that, Chris. Agreed about the lack of desire to be in law enforcement. We've been so demonized. Who would want to be us? And those of us doing it for years are just beat down from the drumming. Right. I remember, I think it was around the time of the Dallas shooting when those 5 police officers were murdered by that insane, misled individual, given poor information. I had a friend of mine that I worked with in downtown Las Vegas. He sent me a message on Facebook, and he was just like, Eric, why can't people understand that he's a white guy? He says, I just don't understand why people just want to assume that when a cop does something wrong, that it has to be about them being racist. He says, why can't it be that some people are just idiots? Or some people have poor training? He says, man, because he was getting so much grief on the streets. And this was a good dude too. And I know there's some cops out there that are 100% worthless or very close to it when it comes to actually being an officer, whether it's training or whether it's a patrol officer or wherever they work. I know that there are officers out there, like in any career field, in any career field, there are people out there who don't need to be there, who do not need to be there. But there was such a villainization of the police, and he was just heartbroken. And he and I just went back and forth. I was just texting him and talking to him a bit. And he was just like, man, I'm tired of people assuming that I hate a whole race of people just because of my skin color. And I felt his pain. And it's another reason why I'm so passionate about this topic, because it's just a matter of time in any society. You give people too much power and too much authority, they will have a tendency to want to abuse it. That's why cops need internal affairs and citizens review boards and all the different checks and balances that law enforcement have. Now we're seeing it on a cultural perspective, because for many a year you had people saying Christians and religious people shouldn't push their beliefs down other people's throat. So then as society has become, especially here in the United States, has become less and less of a religious culture and more of a more secularized, what are we seeing from those who are seating themselves in a position of authority and power? Those individuals, especially the woke and social justice crowd, they're the ones who are forcing the hand of their beliefs. If you don't agree with us, you need to be silenced. If you don't agree with us, you need to be canceled. Or if you don't agree with us, you need to have your children taken away. This is how bad it's getting in our society. And so I know some people find it difficult to actually believe that, but all you have to do is just pick up a newspaper and do some reading and get off the first 5 or 6 pages of Google and start seeing what's happening out there in the world. You see parents out there actually fighting to keep their kids from being taken away because they don't believe that their kids should transition. It's the reality. You see someone out there who is something that they wrote on, 15 years ago on social media being brought up now, and they're being fired for something that they said decades ago. This is where we are. And that whole cancel culture only goes to if it doesn't align with their perspective. It's such hypocrisy. He did a video on it. I'm a contact of Seiko, Corey, and Kwam. Gotcha. Yeah, I'm about to check that out. I'm definitely going to have to check out that video. Mullen Laird, private U.S. citizens have more firearms than most militaries. Yeah, that's very true. And the cool part about that is when you think of how much gun crime is actually going on in the United States, I think there are over 300 million rifles in the United States. I saw a post somewhere not that long ago, I think it was a couple of days ago, that if those of us who were legal, lawful firearm users, if we were truly out there running and gunning and causing all the problems, you would really know about it because things would be way worse than they are right now. But the vast majority of the gun crime comes from people who, I would argue, don't own them legally. It's a little embarrassing now, but when I first started hearing BLM on the news, I was genuinely scratching my head trying to figure out what the Bureau of Land Management had to do with what I was seeing and hearing in the news stories. By the way, I appreciate what you are saying here. We need more Christian men speaking up. Thank you, sister. I appreciate that. I appreciate your candor, being candid about wondering about BLM and the Bureau of Land Management. That's pretty funny. And I'm sure you ain't the only one. You just one of the few that's actually willing to admit it. Unfortunately, time for me to take off. Hey, Chris, I appreciate you being here, brother. Appreciate you stopping by. Wow, 18 years later, living a pure criminal lifestyle, dear Lord. And that's only 18 years. And I mean, that's some people. I have family members that I know who have been, I mean, most of them are gone now, but they lived a life of crime their whole lives. It's just really sad. But folks, I'm telling you, this whole situation right here is so sad. And I hope that those people out there who have been ignoring these situations by basically saying, well, it's not happening to me, it's not happening in my neighborhood, I'm not going to worry about it. I hope this video, the one where the lady was savagely beaten, I hope it's a wake-up call for some people out there. Now, I know a lot of folks out there, it won't be any good. It won't change the way they think or feel at all. But I truly hope that some eyes are opened up about this. This lady may literally lose the vision in her right eye over this guy who should not have been out. And I hope she sues the pants off of the state of New York and any DA and anybody, however that works, anybody involved in this guy getting out over and over again. And I hope she wins. I hope she wins a lot of money and she makes them pay. But the sad reality is those lawmakers who push forward a lot of these policies, they'll never have to fork out a dime, and that's unfortunate. They're protected by a lot of the things that they hate on law enforcement for. Isn't that pretty crazy? Anyway, before you go, y'all, make sure you check out some of my other content, some of the other videos. I've been doing a lot of shorts lately. Please follow. If you appreciate the discussion today, please like and subscribe and follow along with my content and share my videos. I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. I truly feel as if the content that I create is so necessary, where we discuss issues of the police, law enforcement, or the criminal justice system in general, and personal protection. Personal protection can go a long way, y'all. Had this woman been in a situation where she was able to carry a weapon, things might have, we probably would have seen a different outcome. We probably would have seen a different outcome. But as always, thank y'all for joining me. And in the meantime, as always, stay safe, God bless, and make sure you join the conversation.